Hello everyone, and welcome back. I hope today's story gives you a chance to relax, unwind, and step away from the stress of a long day. If you enjoy stories like this, please support the channel with a like, a share, and a subscription. Your support truly means a lot, and it gives me the motivation to keep bringing you more stories to enjoy. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's begin the story. The human who sat with the accused at the courtroom on Talora was built from pale stone and hard white light. Every chair was clean, identical, and bolted in exact rows. At the center of the floor, one woman stood alone beneath the judge's gaze. Her name was Sarah Venn. Evan Mercer had come to Talora as an independent safety assessor after a cargo crane collapsed at Doran Kess's factory yard. He expected to inspect metal, logs, and damaged equipment. Instead, he was watching the worker accused of sabotaging the crane face a courtroom with no one beside her. Across the room, Doran sat with his legal representative, Varek Pell, and factory supervisors. Sarah had no representative, no family, and no friend. Beside her was an empty chair. Judge Marek Sol asked for her account. The crane began pulling toward the exit lane, Sarah said. Workers had just been released. I stopped the rotation. Varek immediately called it sabotage. Sarah answered that she had released a failed rotation lock to keep the load from swinging into people. A tone sounded. The wall display marked her statement as unsupported. Evan asked the insurance clerk beside him what that meant. No co-witness, she said. Under Talaran law, testimony without someone willing to sit beside the accused carries less community confidence. The phrase was polished. The meaning was simple. A poor person who could not find someone willing to risk a future beside them was already losing. Varek began to describe the failed crane. He used clean words. He spoke of damaged cargo, disrupted production, and a minor injury Doran had suffered when a support railing struck his arm. He spoke of Sarah's prior complaints about skipped maintenance shifts. He made those complaints sound like a reason for revenge. Then he described the manual override. Evan sat forward. The accused released the west rotation lock at 17 minutes past the 6th hour, Varek said. This caused the crane to turn under uneven load. Evan had read the equipment summary on the flight down. He had seen the photographs of the bent cargo frame. A person trying to damage that crane would not release the west rotation lock at that moment. They would cut power to the stabilizer or overload the central lift. Releasing the rotation lock made sense only if something had already begun pulling the boom in a direction it was not supposed to go. He raised a hand. Judge Marek looked at him. You are Evan Mercer, technical assessor for the outside insurer. I am. Your report has not been submitted. It has not. Then you may reserve your findings for the designated review. Evan kept his voice level. There is a detail in the account of the override that does not fit the damage pattern. Varek's eyes narrowed. Marek folded his hands. You are not counsel. No, but you asked the court to accept a technical conclusion. I am the only person here assigned to inspect the technical side. For the first time, several workers at the back lifted their heads. Marek considered him. You may ask one clarifying question. Evan looked at Doran. Where was the west balance arm when the lock was released? Doran answered too quickly. Neutral. Evan did not move. If it was neutral, releasing the lock would not have put the load into the exit lane. Varek stepped in. The owner is not a crane operator. He is giving a general description. Then who gave you the description? No one answered at once. Sarah looked at Evan with something that was not hope yet. It was caution. The kind of caution a person learned after watching hope become expensive. Marek's voice cut through the pause. The question will be examined during technical review. The court will now proceed to preliminary finding. A second tone sounded. The display above, Sarah brightened. The display showed a preliminary finding was pending. Unsupported testimony carried reduced weight. The empty chair beside Sarah remained empty. Evan felt something settle inside him. Not anger exactly. Anger was loud and quick. This was colder. It was the familiar feeling he had known at collapsed work sites, when a manager insisted a warning sign had been visible even though it had been painted over. Or when a maintenance crew was blamed for a failure they had warned about for months. He stood. The insurance clerk grabbed lightly at his sleeve. Mr. Mercer. Evan walked down the narrow aisle. Corinne Ash, the court security chief, moved one step from the wall. He was broad through the chest, taller than Evan by a few inches, and dressed in a gray uniform without ornament. His hand did not reach for a weapon. It did not need to. His posture said he was used to rooms becoming orderly when he entered them. Evan stopped beside the empty chair. Judge Marek watched him. "You may not enter the floor without authorization. I am requesting authorization to act as co-witness." The room changed. It was not a sound. It was a withdrawal of breath. The insurance clerk whispered behind him, "Do not do that." Marek's expression did not change. "You understand the law?" "I understand enough." "Say it." Evan kept his eyes on the judge. "If Sarah Venn is found to have knowingly made a false statement in her defense, I accept the co-witness penalty. My tower and work license can be suspended. My standing with local contracts can be reduced. The record will follow me while I work in this region. And," Evan looked at Sarah then, "and her statement will be heard without the unsupported mark." Sarah spoke before Marek could. "No." Her voice was stronger now. "You do not know me. You do not know what happened. I know that. Then stand up before you make your life smaller for mine." Evan pulled the chair free. Its legs made a small scraping sound across the spotless floor, louder than any shout would have been. "I am not saying you are innocent," he said. "I am saying no one should be half convicted because they have no safe person to sit beside them." He sat down. The display above them went dark. Then it confirmed that Sarah now had a protected statement under a registered co-witness. For a moment, no one spoke. Judge Marek looked at Evan with open disapproval. "The court records your choice." Corinne Ash's eyes remained on Evan, calm and unreadable. Varek Pell gave a quiet, almost sympathetic smile. "Then the outside assessor has made himself part of the consequence." Evan rested his forearms on his knees. "Looks that way." Beside him, Sarah stared straight ahead. Her hands were clasped so tightly that the tips of her fingers had gone pale. The court recessed for technical review. As the room began to move again, Sarah spoke without looking at him. "You should have stayed in your chair." Evan stood. "Maybe you will regret this." "Maybe." That made her look at him. He gave her the smallest shrug. "I have regretted worse things." Corinne Ash approached. "Mr. Mercer, you will remain available to the court. You may not leave the building without notice." "Understood." During recess, Evan reviewed the technical record under his insurer's authority. It was too clean. Every inspection had been cleared on time, every warning closed, every maintenance line perfectly formatted. In the load log, though, he found repeated weight overages during evening shifts. In the energy data, he found the West Balance arm pulling excess power. 5 days before the accident, the arm had been taken offline for 11 minutes with no work order and no engineer signature. Before he left the records terminal, Evan used his assessor authority to sync the public logs and energy records to the insurer's remote account. The original mechanical recorder inside the crane housing could still settle the question. It would show the exact movement sequence before the collapse. But the yard had scheduled a cleaning cycle to run through the damaged section before nightfall. Heat and solvent would wipe the recorder clean. Evan returned to the courtroom with the public records still open on his wrist screen. Sarah sat where he had left her. The empty chair was no longer empty, but the space around them still felt like an island. "You found something?" she asked. "Maybe. That means yes. It means there are missing maintenance records and overloaded shift logs. It means the mechanical recorder might show why you did what you did." Soray's fuss tightened. "The recorder is still there? For now. Then go get it." Evan did not answer. She understood before he spoke. "The chair. The moment I leave it, your testimony becomes unsupported again. Then leave it. Soha, you came here to inspect a crane. You found the proof. Go." Evan looked toward the judge's platform, where Marek had returned with a fresh stack of case notes. Varek stood beside Doran, speaking quietly. Doran did not look worried. He looked tired, as if the whole process had become an inconvenience he expected to survive. "You know what happens if I go?" Evan asked. "You bring back the recorder." "No. You lose protected testimony while I am gone." Pell asked for a preliminary ruling. "You're taken to holding. The court says it is procedure. You do not know that." I know how systems work when they're built to make people disappear politely. Sarah's eyes hardened. And I know what it is to live inside one. Do not make me your reason to fail. That landed harder than he expected. Evan had spent most of his life around broken structures. Steel, concrete, electrical grids, pressure doors. He had learned that in a crisis, there was usually a right move and a wrong move. The right move was not always easy, but it existed. This was different. If he went for the recorder, he might save Sarah with proof. If he stayed, he might save the idea that Sarah deserved to be heard at all. The first choice was practical. The second was harder to defend on paper. A court attendant approached Marek and whispered. The judge looked toward Evan. Mr. Mercer, Marek said, the court will resume. You may retain your co-witness position, or you may withdraw and proceed with your technical work. The choice is yours. Every eye in the room turned toward him. Evan knew the route to the yard. He had already mapped it. He could take a service vehicle through the eastern access lane. He could climb the crane housing using the maintenance rail. He could pull the recorder himself if the housing had not warped. He had done harder things under worse conditions. That was why leaving would have been easy to explain. He looked at Sarah. She was not pleading with him. She was giving him permission to save himself from her. Evan sat down. I am staying, he said. Sarah closed her eyes for one brief second. Varek Pell's smile returned. Then the court may note that the accused and her co-witness have chosen sentiment over evidence. Evan turned toward him. No, we chose not to make her right to speak depend on whether your client can erase a machine fast enough. Doran's face changed then. Not much, but enough. Marek struck the edge of his platform once with a small metal rod. The court will proceed. The hearing resumed under a tighter silence. Evan used the public logs to ask Doran about the overloaded shifts, the missing maintenance interval, and the exit lane removed from the official diagram. Doran gave smooth answers that did not fit together. When he claimed the exit lane had been closed, Sarah said quietly that it had not. The clerk found that the earlier diagram had been replaced through a factory administrator account. At the back of the room, an older worker named Halen Dorr stared at Sarah as if he had been waiting years for someone to ask the right question. Varek seized on the missing mechanical recorder and asked whether Evan would finally retrieve it. So how we spelled? Go. Evan stayed seated. If I leave, this court will strip her protection before it examines what your client erased. The remaining time on the recorder was running out while the courtroom watched. Evan had chosen Sarah's right to speak over the cleanest evidence that might have saved her. He could no longer leave the chair without stripping away her protection. The loss hurt Evan because he understood its value. A machine could have told the story without fear, hesitation, or a family depending on the next paycheck. Now the court would have to decide whether living people deserve the same patience. Then Halen Dorr stood. The older worker's knees shook as he rose, but his voice carried. I heard it, he said. Varek turned. You are not under examination. Halen looked toward Marek, not Varek. I heard the west arm. 3 weeks ago. It made a grinding sound when the load passed the exit lane. Marek said, Were you assigned to the crane? No. Then. Why were you there? My daughter works the late packing line. I waited for her some nights. Doran's face hardened. Mr. Dorr is a temporary laborer. He has no technical training. Halen's eyes dropped to the floor. For a second, Evan thought he might sit down again. Then Evan spoke, not to Halen, but to Marek. He does not need technical training to say what he heard. Varek said, he has no co-witness either. Marek looked at the court clerk. May he offer a factual statement without entering a co-witness bond? The clerk looked uneasy. Yes, but its weight is limited without standing confirmation. Evan nodded once, then recorded. Halen's statement entered the system. A thin pale mark appeared beside it, less bright than Doran's testimony, but it did not vanish. Sarah watched Halen with tears she did not let fall. After Halen came Tessa Wren. Tessa was younger than Sarah, with a narrow face and a work jacket still stained at the cuffs. She said she had seen warning indicators removed from the break room display after the night's supervisor called maintenance. She did not know why. She had assumed the lights were wrong. Then Jory Vale spoke. He was a junior mechanic, barely old enough to look comfortable in a courtroom. He admitted he had signed a maintenance sheet he had not read because his supervisor told him it was routine. Varric called each statement confused, partial, and contaminated by fear. He was not entirely wrong. They were afraid. Their memories came in pieces. They did not describe events with the polish of trained witnesses. But the pieces began to connect. The exit lane had not been closed. The balance arm had been making noise. The warning lights had been removed. The maintenance sheet had been signed without inspection. The load log had been altered. Sarah had not created the danger. She had been standing nearest it when it finally broke. The courtroom clock reached the hour of the cleaning cycle. A single chime sounded from the public display. A public display announced that the mechanical recorder purge had begun. Sarah's face went still. Evan felt the loss in his own chest. The recorder had been clean-proof. It would have shown the sequence in a way no lawyer could bend. Varric lifted his hand slightly. It is unfortunate that the one objective record has now been destroyed by necessary maintenance. Necessary? Evan asked. Doran said nothing. Then the building alarm began. At first, it was only a low tremor under the courtroom floor. Then a deep warning pulse rolled through the walls. The court system announced that smoke had been detected in the lower service levels and that a controlled evacuation was in progress. Corinne Ash moved at once. This was his element. His body changed before his expression did, every motion becoming sharp and economical. All non-essential persons stand, he ordered. Court staff, move observers through the north exit. Parties to the case will follow designated security routes. Workers at the back began to rise. Fear traveled faster than instruction. Halen looked toward Tessa. Jory backed away from the rail. Corinne pointed to a side hall. Low-standing witnesses and accused persons, East Corridor. Evan looked at the evacuation map on the wall. The East Corridor did not lead outside. It led down one level into temporary holding rooms. He had seen the plan while reviewing access routes. The rooms were designed for detainees awaiting transfer. Thick doors. No public viewing panels. No connection to the main courtroom. Eastern Corridor is not an exit, Evans said. Corinne did not turn. It is a protected route. It leads to holding. It leads to a secure assembly point, with individual rooms. Corinne faced him then. Mr. Mercer, this is not the time. It is exactly the time. You separate them now, and they will be questioned one by one before the court resumes. Varric's voice cut in, controlled but urgent. Security procedures are not your concern. Smoke has been detected. Let Chief Ash do his work. Evan stepped closer to Corinne, keeping his voice low enough that only the nearest people could hear. Look at the map. The north exit is clear. The east corridor is sealed after the first pressure door. If that smoke reaches the lower level, they're trapped in a room with no public access. Corinne's eyes flicked to the map. Only for a moment. You are speculating. I am reading the building. A second alarm sounded, sharper than the first. Thin gray vapor slid from a vent near the ceiling. The court staff began moving toward the north exit. 2 guards approached Sarah and the 3 workers. Sarah looked at Evan. Do not make this worse. I'm trying not to. Then let them take us. You cannot fight the court. Evan glanced past her. The east corridor doors had opened. Beyond them waited a narrow passage lined with red floor lights. No windows. No observers. He had worked in enough compromised buildings to know the difference between a route designed to move people to safety and a route designed to control them. The east corridor was control. He made a decision. Corinne, Evan said, if you want them moved, move them through the north concourse where everyone could see them. If you cannot do that, I will not let Sarah walk into that hall. Corinne's jaw tightened. You do not have authority here. No, but I know a bad route when I see one. The guards reached for Sarah's arms. Evan moved between them and her. He did not strike anyone. He did not need to. He planted his feet, shoulders square, and caught one guard's wrist before it closed around Sarah's elbow. He redirected the hand away, stepped back, and put himself in the narrow space between the guards and the witnesses. Do not touch them until Chief Ash confirms the route, he said. The guard tried to push through him. Evan shifted his weight, turned the force aside, and held the line. It was a simple movement, learned in places where panicked people could turn a doorway into a crush. Corinne's hand went to the restraint band at his belt. Then the floor shuddered. A harsh metallic bang echoed from below. The east corridor lights flickered. One of the pressure doors slammed halfway shut, then stopped at an angle. Smoke thickened near the ceiling. Evan looked at the gap beneath the door, the sway in the overhead pipes, the vibration under his boots. "The lower service vents are backflowing," he said. "If you send them down there, they will be walking toward the source." Corinne looked past him toward the hall. His security training was fighting his faith in the procedure. Evan could see it. "Close the east corridor," Evan said. Corinne did not move. "Close it." Another pulse shook the building. This time everyone felt it. Corinne snapped an order to his guards. "Seal east corridor. Move court staff north. Keep the witnesses together." Varric stepped forward, angry now. "Chief Ash, you cannot allow an outside contractor to dictate court security." Corinne turned on him. "I am not allowing anything. I am responding to a structural threat." Evan did not thank him. There was no time. The Nor concourse was already filling with frightened people. A rolling door began to descend from the ceiling, designed to isolate the smoke. Evan saw at once that it would close before Halen, whose injured leg slowed him, could cross with the others. "Service panel," Evan said. "Sera pointed." Behind that wall. He ran to it, pulled free the thin access cover, and found the manual brake. The mechanism was not built for untrained hands. Evan braced one shoulder against the wall, twisted the release, and felt the cable fight him. The door slowed. "Move," he shouted. Tessa guided Halen under the gap. Jory followed, then Sarah. The cable snapped loose from the brake handle and lashed across Evan's shoulder. Pain flared down his arm. He ignored it, held the release a second longer, and waited until every person had crossed. Only then did he duck under himself. The door struck the floor behind him with a heavy boom. For a moment, the concourse was quiet except for the alarm. Sarah caught his arm. "You are hurt." "It is not bad." Blood had darkened the sleeve near his shoulder. It was not deep, but it was enough to make his hand feel numb. Corinne arrived with 2 guards. "Mr. Mercer, you are under temporary restraint for obstruction of evacuation." Evan nodded. "Fine." Sarah stepped between them. "He kept us from the lower corridor. He also forced open a service panel and interfered with security personnel. He did it because you were sending us into holding." Corinne's face tightened. "I was sending you to a secure assembly point." "You were sending us somewhere no one could see us," Sarah said. The words hit harder than any accusation Evan had made. Corinne looked at the sealed east corridor. Smoke had begun to seep beneath the door now, thin and gray. He said, "All witnesses remain in the north concourse until the court resumes." Varric appeared at the far end of the hall, flanked by Doran and 2 factory supervisors. His clothing was untouched. His expression was no longer composed. "This is unacceptable," he said. "My client is being treated as if he caused a building emergency." Evan turned his head. "Did he?" Doran stared at him. The smoke alarm had not started at the factory. It had started beneath the court in the service level that connected to the records archive. The same archive where the factory administrator account had replaced diagrams and where the original maintenance request might still exist. Evan looked toward the sealed corridor again. The lower service vents had backflowed because something below them had been pressurized. A purge system. Someone had not only erased the mechanical recorder. They had tried to flush the archive level before the court could inspect it. Evan said, "Corinne, the archive level is connected to the factory's emergency data line, isn't it?" Corinne did not answer. "It is," Evan continued. "The purge did not start because of random smoke. It started because the archive was overpressurized." Varric lifted both hands. "That is an extraordinary claim." "Then check the pressure readings." Corinne's gaze sharpened. He spoke into his wrist. "Calm, control. Send me the source of the lower alarm." "Full sensor trace." A pause. Then the answer came through, faint but audible. "Chief, pressure spike originated in Archive Service Bay 3. Manual release code registered from external factory access." No one moved. Duran's face had gone pale. Varric recovered first. "There may be an automated connection. My client cannot be responsible for every system linked to his facilities." Evan looked at him. No, but somebody was scared enough to burn a recorder and choke an archive. Corinne ordered Doran and Varric held in the concourse. Not arrested. Not yet. Just held. The court resumed 2 hours later in a smaller public chamber. The smoke had been contained. The archive level had not burned, but the purge had destroyed several local files. Fortunately, Evan had already synced the public logs and energy records to the insurer's remote account during recess before the purge began. It was not a perfect victory. The original mechanical recorder was gone. The archive had been damaged. Evan's shoulder was bound, and he sat beside Sarah with a security band around one wrist. But the case had changed. Marek returned to the bench slowly. He looked older now. Not softer. Older. The court will hear the remaining testimony, he said. Varric rose. Before we proceed, I request that the statements made during the evacuation be excluded. Mr. Mercer influenced security decisions, obstructed personnel, and created a climate of fear among witnesses. Corinne Ash stood from the side wall. The witnesses were not under Mr. Mercer's control. They were under mine. Everyone turned toward him. Corinne continued. The east corridor was not safe. The lower level was compromised. Mr. Mercer identified the risk before security verification. His intervention prevented movement into a hazardous area. Varric's mouth tightened. Marek looked at Evan. Your conduct remains under review. I expect it is. But the court will not exclude testimony because a witness was kept from entering an unsafe corridor. Sarah's fingers brushed the edge of the chair between them, not touching Evan, just close enough that he noticed. The hearing began again. This time, Evan did not need to force the questions. The facts had acquired weight. The public energy records showed an abnormal drain on the west balance arm. The external access trace showed a manual purge from a factory link code. The alter diagram had removed the exit lane. Halen, Tessa, and Jory repeated their accounts. Doran answered each question, but his answers no longer joined together. Why had the exit lane been removed? A formatting correction. Why had the night loads increased? A temporary contract demand. Why had warning lights been cleared? A technical fault. Why had an archive purge come from factory access? An unknown misuse of credentials. Each answer could have stood alone. Together, they sounded like a man building walls, in different directions and discovering none of them touched. Then Marek asked Sarah to speak. She stood. Evan rose with her because the co-witness position required it. The room looked different now. The workers no longer sat only at the back. Some had moved closer during the recess. There were still many empty chairs, but not all of them. Sarah faced the judge. I did not stop the crane because I wanted to hurt Doran Kess, she said. I stopped it because I saw where it was going. Her voice was calm, not polished. Real. I knew the west arm had been failing. I had reported it. I knew the exit lane was open because I had walked through it every night for years. When the crane pulled that way, I did what I knew how to do. I released the lock. The cargo fell. Doran was hurt. Equipment was damaged. But the load did not swing into the people leaving the yard. She paused. I'm not asking this court to believe me because Evan Mercer sat beside me. He did not see the crane move. He did not work in the yard. He does not know my family. She looked at Evan then, and he could see the effort it cost her to keep her voice steady. He sat beside me because no one else could do it safely. That is the part you should be ashamed of. Not that a stranger took the chair. That everyone who knew me was too afraid to take it. No one shifted in the courtroom. Sarah continued. I was afraid too. I knew the warning systems were being ignored. I knew the logs were wrong. I did not speak loudly enough before the accident because I thought they would close the yard and punish everyone who depended on it. I told myself staying quiet was protecting my neighbors. Her hands tightened once at her sides. It was not. It was only fear wearing the shape of responsibility. Halen lowered his head. Tessa wiped at her face. Jory stared at the floor. Sarah looked back at Marek. When I stood here alone, you did not have to call me guilty. You had already told the room that my words mattered less because I had no one beside me. You made my loneliness part of your evidence. Marek did not look away. Evan felt the courtroom holding itself around that sentence. Marek asked, what remedy do you believe the court should have offered? Sarah gave a small, tired laugh. I am not a judge. No, Marek said. But you are the person this system failed. For the first time since the hearing began, Varek Pell looked uncertain. Sarah thought for a moment. Do not make a person gamble another person's future just to be heard. If someone sits beside an accused person, let it mean they are protecting the right to speak. Do not make it mean they will be punished for believing the accused deserves a voice. The judge's eyes moved to Evan. Evan did not speak. This was not his moment to explain humanity. It was Sarah's moment to explain what Talora had done to its own people. Marek called for final review. The decision did not come immediately. Taloran courts were proud of speed, but speed had brought them here. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time in the court's history, Marek ordered an open technical inquiry before preliminary judgment. The result came near midnight. Sarah Van was cleared of sabotage. The court found that her emergency action had contributed to the cargo collapse, but had likely prevented a larger casualty event in the exit lane. It found sufficient evidence of altered records, unsafe loading patterns, and improper factory access to order a full investigation of Doran Kess and his company. Doran did not shout. He simply sat very still as Corinne Ash approached him. The security chief did not put restraints on him in front of the room. He placed one hand on Doran's shoulder and asked him to come. Varek gathered his screens with precise movements. His face had become blank again, but the confidence was gone. When the chamber cleared, Evan remained seated. The adrenaline had faded, and his shoulder hurt more than he had admitted. The security band was removed from his wrist, leaving a pale mark. Corinne came to stand in front of him. Your Taloran work license is suspended pending review, he said. Evan nodded. I assumed it would be. You forced a safety door. I opened it. You obstructed guards. I stopped them from taking witnesses into an unsafe corridor. Corinne looked toward the sealed side hall. You were right about the route. I know. That almost made Corinne smile, but not quite. I also need to say this, Corinne continued. When I first saw you move between my guards and the accused, I thought you were trying to control the situation. I thought you believed your judgment mattered more than ours. Evan leaned back carefully. Sometimes it does. Corinne's eyes narrowed. Evan lifted his uninjured hand. Not because I am human, because I had read the building map. A brief silence passed. Then Corinne gave a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. But you were also right about something else, Corinne said. I was following a route because it was the route. I did not ask who it would separate, or what would happen after the door closed. Evan looked at him. Corinne stared at the empty chair beside Sarah's place on the court floor. On Talora, he said, we learn that order protects the weak from the powerful. We repeat it until it becomes true in our mouths. Today I saw order protect the powerful from the weak. He turned and walked away before Evan could answer. After Sarah was cleared, Evan's license remained under review. In the days that followed, he gave investigators his saved records and refused to make claims he could not prove. Sarah, Halen, Tessa, and Jory gave their own statements to labor inspectors. Other workers began filing safety reports. Evan and Sarah spoke once in the empty outer hall of the courthouse. You could have gone for the recorder, she said. I know. You did not know I was telling the whole truth. No. Then why stay? Evan looked at the chair where she had stood alone. A fair hearing is not a reward for being perfect. A week later, Judge Marek called a public session. Evan was surprised to be invited. His license review was not complete. He assumed the judge wanted another statement about the evacuation. The main courtroom was open again. The damaged archive level had been sealed, and the air smelled faintly of new wall sealant. Workers, clerks, court staff, and representatives from other districts filled the seats. At the center floor sat the same chair, the one Evan had pulled out for Sarah. Marek entered without ceremony. Corinne stood at the side wall. Sarah sat in the first row with Halen, Tessa, and Jory behind her. Marek began. The Court of Talora has reviewed the co-witness statute and the procedures used during the Venn hearing. The room became very still. The statute was created to prevent false support from influencing legal judgment. It assumed that shared consequence would prove the seriousness of those who offered support. He paused. In practice, it created a penalty that some citizens could bear and others could not. It made companionship a resource for the wealthy and isolation a burden for the poor. Evan felt Sarah's gaze turn toward the judge. Marek continued. Effective immediately, co-witness status will no longer transfer punishment to the person who sits beside an accused citizen. A co-witness may protect the accused person's right to speak and to be heard, but may not be penalized merely for providing that protection. A murmur moved through the room. Further, any accused citizen without representation will be offered an independent hearing advocate. Witnesses will not be removed from public process under emergency authority without recorded safety justification and review. Corinne's expression did not change, but Evan saw the slightest shift in his shoulders. Not pride, responsibility. Marek looked down toward Evan. Mr. Mercer, your conduct during the evacuation is still subject to formal review. Talora does not erase rules because an outcome appears favorable. Evan nodded once. But Talora will no longer claim that a rule is fair merely because it has been followed for a long time. That was as close to an apology as a judge like Marek would ever offer. After the session, Evan expected to leave. Instead, an attendant brought him a sealed notice. His work license remained suspended for 6 months. The findings stated that he had acted outside the scope of his assignment, interfered with court security, and entered a restricted service route without approval. He read it once. Then he folded the notice and put it in his pocket. Sarah found him at the exit. They still suspended you. They did. 6 months. That is what the paper says. Does it bother you? Evan looked through the tall glass doors at the streets of Talora. Beyond them, the labor district climbed toward the hillside in tight blocks of old housing. For years, people there had walked past the courthouse without expecting its doors to open the same way for them as they did for Dorankes. Yes, he said. It bothers me. Soha no did. Good. He looked at her. If it did not bother you, she said, then it would not have cost you anything. Evan smiled despite himself. You have a way of making comfort sound rude. I have had practice. The next morning, Evan went to the spaceport. His shoulder was healing. His bag was light. The insurance board had arranged transport back to the regional hub, where he could spend 6 months reviewing reports instead of walking through damaged structures. It was not what he wanted, but he had accepted worse assignments. He boarded early and took a seat by the window. As the transport lifted above Talora, the courthouse became a small dark shape between the pale towers. The factory yard was visible beyond it, cranes standing still under investigation flags. Evan thought of the chair. He wondered how long a new rule would last when Doran's lawyers began pushing against it. He wondered whether the workers would trust it. He wondered whether some future judge would weaken it one quiet decision at a time. He had no answer. A month later, a message arrived on his travel account. It contained no greeting, no long explanation, only a single image from Sarah. The courtroom on Talora had another case that morning. A man from a labor district stood before the bench accused of stealing machine parts. He looked frightened. He looked poor. There was no lawyer beside him. But the chair at his side was already occupied. Not by Sarah, by Halen Dor. Behind Halen sat Tessa and Jory. Corinne Ash stood at the wall near the east corridor doors, which were locked open to the public concourse. Judge Marek watched from his platform. Sarah had taken the picture from the last row. Under it, she had written 4 words, "No one stand alone." Evan looked at the image for a long time. Then he placed the screen face down on the narrow table beside him and listened to the quiet hum of the transport crossing open space. For once, he did not feel like he had left something unfinished behind. Some truths survive because someone is brave enough to speak them. Others survive because another person refuses to let them stand alone. Evan Mercer did not change Talora with a perfect speech or a fight. He changed it by sitting down when everyone else stayed away. Maybe that is what makes humans different. Not always knowing who is right, but choosing to stand beside someone long enough for the truth to be heard. If this story stayed with you, please like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe for more stories about humanity, courage, and the choices that change entire worlds. Thank you for listening. And until next time, do not leave the right person standing alone.